And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we bring in the top experts to discuss the most pressing economic and business issues of the day. Over a third of young Poles aged 25 to 34 are still living at home with their parents. It's important to note that this 2022 figure released by Statistics Poland this week indicates an over 15% drop since 2018. But the question is, why is this happening in the first place? I'm now joined by Professor Witold Orłowski, PricewaterhouseCoopers Chief Economic Advisor in Poland, to discuss the significance of this research.
Oh.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you very much for joining us.
Either.
So before we get into the main topic, I wanted to hear your immediate thoughts after the Monetary Policy Council's decision to keep the rates unchanged and the National Bank of Poland's inflation projection for 2024 and beyond.
Well, it's not a surprise. Actually, all the economists basically expected something like that. And I would say, partly I'm happy, partly I'm sad, because the news from the President Glapiński were not very nice. But I basically agree with what he said, and that at that moment, I mean, the forecast of the central bank and the analysis of the central bank seem to be pretty close to what majority of the economists think is the situation. Why I'm partly, I said why I'm sad, but why I'm happy, because that brings us to the point that it is really good to have, and that's important to have the chairman, the chair, the president of the central bank, not politically affiliated. And I must say that there's a big difference now in the behavior, in the analysis presented by Professor Glapiński. Now, once the period when he was closely associated to the government, the previous government, he was closely associated, and that clearly have been influencing his analysis, his method of communication. Basically, he was famous of making all the promises about the immediate fall of the inflation at the moment when the inflation was really on the rise and deeply on the rise. And he was, as everybody is suspecting, he was doing it only because he was thinking that it would be a good support for the government that he liked very much. Now he doesn't seem to like very much the government. And I hope that it means simply that we are in a normal world in which fortunately, Professor Glapiński is not behaving as an enemy of the government, but as a professional economist. So he's no longer telling us the fairy tales about the inflation that is gone. That was his continuous message at the time when the government in power was the government that he was supporting, that he was nominated by, and now he's giving us quite a decent economic analysis of the situation. So let's cross the fingers that this is not only temporary. That means that simply kind of a period of a strange emotions between the president of the central bank and the government are simply over.
A new chapter. Okay, and so moving on to our main topic. The number of young adults living with parents in 2022 has decreased by over 15% from 2018. Can you perhaps tell us what is behind this change, and perhaps why hasn't this figure gone down even more?
Well, it's obvious that Poland is getting richer year after year, that incomes are growing. It's clear that more people are finding better jobs, for example, in a different town, and that means they are moving out of the family houses and going to Warsaw or to Wrocław or to Poznań to work. And then, independently, either they like it or not, they must rent an apartment. We in Poland sometimes we are talking. I mean, that's a kind of a joke that they are sometimes called, they are recognized by the fact that they are going every weekend to their houses, bringing a lot of the family food from their houses, prepared by the parents, by mothers, and so on and so on. And that's one point. The second point is that obviously there was a progress in the availability of the apartments caused by the government financed schemes that help young people to buy the apartment. So it must have helped a bit. So basically, the situation when young people are living with their parents, I mean, too many of them, I mean, too many in a sense comparing to other countries, is normally the indicator of a difficult economic situation, of low wages that do not allow for the reformatting the apartment. And somehow there is no doubt that the economic situation of Poland has been improving well over the last 30 years, practically year after year, with some small exception of pandemics or this type of the shocks that were slowing down the growth. So Poland is richer. We are closer to the normality, but still we are, as you notice, pretty far away from the normality. So if you compare the number of young adults living with their parents,
well, just you mentioned.
Countries, it's still significantly high in Poland.
Yes, you mentioned that wages are on the rise, but still there are quite a lot of young people living with their parents, and also the prices of real estate. But I wanted to ask about the impact that this has on Poland's already very low fertility rates. One could say, perhaps, correctly or incorrectly, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, that if wages are on the rise, shouldn't people be more inclined to have more children because of financial stability? But that's not quite the case, is it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There is something like that, and it's well known in the economy that whenever you've got a crisis situation, that the fertility is falling because people simply say, however strange it sounds, they cannot afford having kids at that time. They cannot afford planning a family at that time. And then this is the moment when a lot of people are staying with parents or coming back even to parents' house. But let me draw your attention to one important point that although has got some cultural dimension, it's not only pure economics. In Poland, as in many Central and Eastern European countries, there is during the communist time there was kind of a change in I mean, people were the mobility of people were very low, and somehow getting the apartment was difficult. But somehow whoever had the apartment was keeping it, living in the same place for the whole life, and somehow that leads to a situation in Poland, in many other Central European countries, that the market for renting the apartments is pretty much reduced. People are thinking only about, I mean, solving the problems means buying the apartment. It's totally different than Germany, for example. And please note that you've heard that a young gentleman asked about why it's difficult to why people stay with the parents. He said, because it's so difficult for a young man to buy the apartment because it's so expensive. And the truth is that majority of the young people in majority of the countries cannot afford buying new apartments. They are renting new apartments. They are renting apartments. They are renting places to live. It's not easy. It's not. But in Poland, it's generally culturally non-imaginable. Please note that there's a difference, although notice in the research that you mentioned.
But just as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you.
Okay, last sentence. In Eastern Poland, you've got more young people living with parents than in Western Poland.
That's correct.
Basically, the situation in both countries, both parts of the countries, are economic situation is not very difficult. It is not a very different one, but the cultural differences are big.
But just as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, from your professional point of view, what can be done to remedy this?
Well, the first point is, I mean, the governmental policy should first of all support the development of the market of renting the apartments, not of owning the apartments. I'm not sure that the government has been doing this because the policy was always kind of targeted towards making it easier for people to buy new apartments, why actually the key point is increasing the supply of the apartments to rent. That could lead to lower prices, and that could finally allow young people to move out of the parents, to start their families, and to have children.
Okay, thank you very much, Witold Orłowski, Chief Economic Advisor to PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Business Arena. Make sure you join us next week on TVP World. I was your host, Marie Cato. Goodbye.